So from today we are starting the topic of Indian constitutional law, Constitution of India, and as you know that after getting freedom from colonial rule of the Britain, India decided to draft its own constitution to meet out the aspirations of the general public and to set some goals which may work as a guiding force for governance for legislators after getting this independence in 1947. A constituent assembly was constituted with a target to draft a constitution for the new India, or rather a new independent India. By that time, India was governed by the laws passed by the British Parliament through different enactments. So, without disturbing the existing law, at that point of time, India decided to set its goals and commitment to fulfill the aspirations of the masses of this country, for which they fought for independence and ultimately got it. So it was a very difficult task, but an attempt was made. Constituent Assembly studied various constitutions all over the world, and before drafting the constitution, different committees were formed, and the drafting committee was headed over by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. First of all, this Constituent Assembly set for deciding the goals and the commitments, or you can say the broader outlines of a document which was to be drafted. Because unless and until you have a sketch in your mind, what will you include in the drafting of a document? You will not be able to do so. So, first of all, this preamble of the Constitution was drafted. When this preamble of the Constitution was being drafted, a question arose as to who will derive the authority, and from where it will derive the authority to draft this constitution for new independent India, because till that time the India was governed by the colonial rule, and the Independence of India Act 1947 passed by the British Parliament just removed the colonial rule over the India. Since the power to govern the country was with the British Parliament, it might be possible that there might have been a transfer of the power to govern this country from British Parliament to the Constituent Assembly or to a committee or to a parliament to be constituted for India. But a practical problem was before, because there was no such authority as on the date, because transfer involves two parties. One is transferring the power and other is receiving the power. So India was at that time neither having a parliament nor having its own constitution, nor any legalized authority, though the different organizations were working just for making the India free. So one should be very much clear that this document does not transfer the power from the British Parliament to the Indian Parliament or any other authority. When India became free and the power to govern the country was not transferred, then academic question also arose before the Constituent Assembly, on whose behalf they are working and for what they are working. Who has authorized this Constituent Assembly to draft a constitution? Then after so many debates and deliberations, the Constituent Assembly was unanimous that it was the people of India for whom this constitution was to be drafted, and it was the people of India whose wish and will has succeeded as a result of getting independence from colonial rule. So ultimately, the highest power, highest authority rests with the people of India. When this scene was made clear that it is for the people of India and it is the power is from the people of India, the framers of the Constitution decided to start the preamble with a term we the people of India. So the preamble starts with this term, the people of India. It is the source of power to draft the Constitution. Then they started going ahead. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India. India was not constituted by that time. So India was to be constituted by this draft by adopting this Constitution of India. So if a question arose that when uh, India can said to be constituted a sovereign socialist secular democratic republic, so it is the Constitution of India which made India a sovereign socialist secular democratic republic. So Indian framers of the Constitution, Indian Constitution framers decided to uh, constitute India or build India a sovereign, a socialist, a secular, a democratic republic. So these were the main goals to be achieved by this constitution. India should be a country like this. So we were discussing the sovereign socialist secular democratic republic. These were the broad outlines set out by this Constituent Assembly to form a new country, that is India. Not a new country, but a independent country. New in the sense of independence. So they decided to make it a sovereign country. What does it mean? We will not go in depth or details, but one must be very much clear with the meanings of these terms used, because each and every term has a historical and political background, and whatever the word has already faced, it gives the glimpse of that. So sovereign means it has two connotation. One is internal freedom, a country having freedom to regulate its affairs, manage its affairs independently. So no interference by any other authority, particularly external body, in management of internal affairs of the state. And second aspect of this sovereignty is that free from any outside force. Freedom from outside forces means no outside force can dictate, or no outside force can intervene. So freedom from outside forces as well as freedom in management of internal affairs. So India will be having neither any external force on it, nor will have any interference in the internal affairs, management of internal affairs. So a sovereign country means a country which is free from outside forces as well as free and independent in and management of its internal affairs. That is the concept of the sovereignty. Another term used by framers of the constitution is the socialist. What does it mean? India's constitution was being drafted in 1947 to 1950. By that time, different countries of the world have faced different scenarios arising out of their economic policies. And you can say that countries all over the world were divided, broadly divided into two categories. One, the capitalistic countries, and the another is the communistic countries. In capitalistic countries or capitalistic nations, richer becomes more richer and richer, and poor becomes more poorer and poorer. There is a concentration of wealth in minimum hands. So such type of the nations were called the capitalistic countries, where the wealth of the country or resources of the country, wealth here means it does not include merely to the currency or the assets, but includes the resources. It is a broad term. Wealth means the resources of the country are concentrated in few hands. On contrary, there were some countries having the communistic approach, communism. What is this communism? Communism means and have a concept that resources of the country must be equally distributed among its citizens. So there is no concentration of the resources or wealth of the nation in few hands. Rather, these economic resources are to be distributed among its citizens so that no one is a richer one and no one is poorer one. All are at par with each other. So this is a communistic approach. The main issue before the India was that what type of the country it should be, whether the framer should have opted for the capitalistic country or for the communistic country, because India at that point of time was having certain aspects of the capitalistic country and at the same time also having the voices for the communistic approach. Because in colonial rule, a few industrialist families have economic wealth in their hands, and if India might have choose communistic approach, naturally all such persons vested interests would have been affected. And if the few hands, a wealth in few hands will will not cooperate, how the India will grow, because it is a very newborn state. So India, framers of the constitution could not dare to adopt the communistic approach. When they thought of the another aspect, capitalistic, the experiences in different countries of capitalistic economies have devastating effects. So many revolutions in France, Russia had already taken place as a reaction to the capitalistic form of the governments. So, India, framers of the constitution were of the firmly opinion that they cannot opt for the capitalistic form of the economy. On one side, they cannot choose the communistic approach. On the other hand, they cannot choose the capitalistic approach on account of the existing scenario. The framers of the constitution very wisely and intelligently decided to take a midway. A middle way was between the capitalistic and the communistic approach. That middle path was called the socialistic approach. Socialist. Socialist means removal of economic inequalities. So on one hand there is in capitalistic form of the government's economy, the wealth is concentrated in one hand, so there is it is not possible to have the economic inequalities removed or at least minimized. On the other hand, in communistic form of the economy, it was also not possible to get out the wealth in some hands so as to maintain a equal proportion of the wealth to every citizen. So India thought of becoming a country like socialist, where the state shall endeavor to remove the economic inequalities. Means India has to move from capitalistic to communistic approach, and from communistic to the capitalistic approach, because economic inequalities are inherent in the society, not only in India but also at world at large. So India decided to go with a socialistic pattern of the economy. Another word used was secular. Secular is a very important characteristic of this constitution. Secular means the India will not having its own religion. What does it mean? India will not having means the state will not having its own religion. Number one. Number two, the state will not treat any religion on a priority basis. State will not give preference to any religion and nor will give any benefit to a particular religion or the people professing a particular religion. Meaning thereby, state will not having its own religion, number one, and number two, the India will not in its affairs to its subjects, citizens, will not give any preferential behavior, preferences. So no distinction can be made and no benefit can be given just on account of the religion. So that was the secular state, and reason for adopting this secular nature was that India at that point of time was having Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Parsis, Jews, and so on. So in India there were residing different religions, people of different religions, and framers knew it well that country is a newborn and it could diminish its independence solely on the ground of this secularism if state preferred any religion and there may be any rebellion, outbreak, and the conflicts between different groups professing different religions. So to save country from such type of the danger, they adopted that country should be a secular state. Another term used is the democratic. Democratic has been derived from the democracy. All over the world, different countries have different form of the government. Some countries having the democratic form of the government, some having the monarchical form of the government. Abraham Lincoln's quote, you must know that once he was the president of the first president of the USA, who said that democracy means it is by the people, of the people, and for the people. So whatever is being done by the people, of the people, and for the people signifies the democratic form of the government. And one must be very much clear कि democracy may have the monarchical head and the democracy may have the elected head. So India opted for the head of the state to be elected by the people of this country, nor as a monarchical head. In monarchical system, there is a king or queen is head of the state. He is not elected. He is occupying the office of the head of the state in succession as hereditary. So where the head of the state is hereditary, it is the hereditary form of the democracy, and this people are known as the subjects, not the citizens. So if you take the example of the Britain, England, the head of the state is the king or the queen, whoever may succeed, and the people of the country are the subjects of the state. But in India, here the head of the state is elected, and the people of the state are citizens. That's why the framers of the constitution further use the term republic. The republic implies the negation of the monarchy. So one must know what is the sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So these were the main goals to be achieved, what type of the country they wanted to make. So these were the goals regarding the state, what type of the country they wanted, but it was not enough. On one hand, you dreamed of making a country like sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and no doubt ultimately it was the people of a country, citizens of this country, for whom this constitution was being drafted, and who must be the ultimate beneficiary of this constitution. Setting the noble goals on one hand was perfect, but on the other hand, at the same time, some guarantees to the citizens of this country was felt necessary. So, framers moved ahead by saying, and to secure to all of its citizens. Here they guaranteed what is being secured. In first clause, they set out the goals, what type of the nation we want, and in the second clause, they give a security, they give a guarantee to the citizens of this country. What they secured, or what they tried to guarantee, they guarantee to secure justice. Justice of three types: social justice, economic justice, and the political justice. What is the social justice? What is the economic justice, and what is the political justice? One must know. Social justice means the state shall not treat any person with some advantage or with some disadvantage only on account of his social status. Means a person, irrespective of its social status. The social status means irrespective of the faith to which he belongs, or what is his caste, subcaste, religion, income group. So his status in the society, his standing in the society will in no way will give rise to any benefit, advantage or the disadvantage by the state. Means it was secured that state shall not give neither any advantage nor the disadvantage only on account of a social status. The second justice was the economic justice. Economic justice means, if you remember the socialistic pattern of the country which we discussed earlier, that what type of the nation we wanted. We wanted a socialist nature, country of a socialist nature, country of a socialist economy based on the socialist pattern. Only then the economic justice can be given. Economic justice here means a state shall not give any advantage or the disadvantage only on account of the economic status of a citizen. Means state has to treat all the citizens at par irrespective of their economic conditions, irrespective of their economic wealth. And the another justice was the political justice. What is the political justice? The political justice means participation of the citizens of this country in the politics of this country, and there shall be one man, one vote, equal weightage. Whether a person is the president of this country or the prime minister or the minister, howsoever high his profile may be, but his vote will be having the same weightage as of a ordinary citizen of this country. So, when the participation of the citizens in the polity of this country will be required, no weightage, no advantage, no disadvantage can be given by the state to its citizens only on account of their social status, their economic status, and their political status. So, no distinction can be made. So, these three types of the justice were secured. Remember to note that these all three types of the justice derives its concept from the word which we used earlier, that is the socialist and secular democratic republic. So, in broad term, you can visualize as when we set out the goals, when we set out the targets, what type of the country we want to constitute, these are the just natural consequences of those concepts. Another aspect taken over by the framers was to secure to all its citizens, and one must remember, an emphasis should be given that this security is to its citizens. Security is not given to the non-citizens, it is given only to the citizens of this country. After ensuring the social, economic, and political justice, the framers of the Constitution thought of liberty. Because liberty, concept of the liberty is as old as the history of the civilizations, different civilizations in the world. And nature itself has made the people or the man with some liberties. What can be those liberties? Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. Again, reference can be taken from the secularism, concept of the secularism, where state was made secular, means no intervention in the religious affairs of its citizens. So, liberty of faith and worship, people of this country, citizens of this country were made free to have a thought freely. There is no restriction. Whatever you want to think, you can. No restriction. You can think of becoming a prime minister, you can think of becoming a president of this country. There is no restriction. And after thinking, the expression, there is no restriction. You can express, I thought it to become a prime minister or the president of this country. You can express it in public. So no restriction. And your belief. What is belief? Belief is the general perceptions in the minds of the citizens. For example, belief, Hindus treat the sun as a deity, devta, air, devta, jal, devta, vayu, devta. So these are the belief systems. Hindus believe in, you can say, in the rebirth after the death. Muslims don't believe so. So each and every individual, irrespective of his religion, is free to have belief, faith, and worship. Faith, if somebody is having, Hindus are having the faith of making the parikramas of the people, they can do, no restriction. If somebody want to have worship with a stone, he can do. So no interference by the state in the belief systems, faith and worship. Whatever they want to believe, they can. Whatever they want to have faith, they can. In whatever form they want to worship, they can. So in these all matters, the state will not intervene, not interfere with. This was secured. Why? What was the need of securing all of these? Because India was having numerous belief systems in the country, numerous faiths, numerous religions, different sects, subsects, different way of life. So framers thought of to leave all these aspects with the citizens of the country and not to interfere. Why not to interfere? Because it could shake the roots of a newly formed independent nation. So minimum intervention or zero intervention was presumed to be a correct approach. After securing it, the framers further moved ahead. They talked of equality. Equality is also a very, very old concept in the field of law, in field of the social structures, in the field of the social movements. A number of social movements and revolutions were aimed for the equality, and the different experiences by different countries all over the world were before the framers of the constitution. They studied all and they adopted that we must secure the equality to all its citizens, equality of status and of opportunity. As I told you earlier also, equality of status. No one can be ill treated or with some advantage only on account of his status. Status, whether economic status, political status, religious status, social status, whatever the status may be, the state will treat all its citizens at par. The state shall not treat anyone with some advantage or the disadvantage only on account of their status. Merely treating all the citizens at par was not enough. The framers also included the equality of the opportunity. Though it is inbuilt in the equality, and the state shall not give any preference or advantage to one section of the society over the other sections of the societies while providing opportunity. What does it mean, opportunity? Opportunity may be of employment, state employment, public employment. State cannot treat any particular sect with advantage or disadvantage. Opportunity in the field of politics, election to Lok Sabha, Raj Sabha, state assemblies and the local bodies. In all these elections, the people participate in democracy. So, while providing any opportunity, the state cannot restrict it to a particular section or can never give advantage to one type of the people over the other types of the people. So this opportunity of the status, equality of the status and the equality of the opportunity was secured. So what was secured by the constitution? The justice, liberty and the equality. After securing all these three concepts, framers of the constitution did not stop. They moved ahead by saying, and to promote among them. On one hand, they thought of making a new country like India, sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. On the other hand, they secured to its citizens justice, liberty, and the equality. and there may arise a conflict, maybe to a lesser extent, between these two goals, set of goals. And framers also realized the Indian culture, the culture of fraternity, बंधुत्व की भावना. In Indian cultural values, where one citizen treats other citizens or the fellow citizens as his brother or sister. So this fraternity was the interwoven within the interpersonal relationships of the society, and individuals were having a knot with other with the concept of this fraternity. And framers of this constitution never wanted to disturb its fabric. Rather, they opted to protect it. And to protect it, they moved ahead in preamble to promote among them all fraternity, that the state shall promote the fraternity, the state shall not disturb the fraternity among the citizens of this country, rather state shall promote it. They did not stop here also. They further thought of a mere promotion of fraternity is not enough. They thought of the dignity of the individual. The dignity of the individual is of utmost importance. Each and every concept considered and taken into this preamble will be subject to the dignity of the individual. If India cannot respect the dignity of the individual or cannot secure the dignity of the individual, the thinking of making a country like sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic will be of no use. Keeping the dignity of the individual in jeopardy, and on the other hand maintaining or securing the justice, liberty, equality will be of no use. Promoting of the fraternity will be of no use if the dignity of the individual is disturbed. If we cannot respect the dignity of the individual, then these noble ideas are of no use. So what is the most important aspect of this preamble is that dignity of the individual has been kept on a very, very high pedestal. All the other concepts taken in this preamble are on a lower pedestal in comparison to the dignity of the individual. And not only the dignity and the individual, in 1976, this preamble was amended and the unity and integrity of the nation was also added. Means, if the nation will survive, only then the state will survive. Only then the citizens will survive. If the state will not survive, then nothing could be done. So, in 1976, the parliament realized this aspect and included this term unity and the integrity of the nation with dignity of the individual. Means the net result of this provision now would be dignity of the individual is at par with the unity and the integrity of the nation. And what has to be given the priority is the unity and the integrity of a nation along with the dignity of the individual. So what has to be secured first? Unity and the integrity of a nation. After maintaining the unity and the integrity of the nation, the first and foremost thing which is required to be secured by the state would be the dignity of the individual. So first we will secure the unity and integrity of nation. The nation will survive. Then we will look at the dignity of the individual, and maintaining these two aspects, we will secure justice, liberty, equality, and while doing so, we will promote the fraternity. The means was also provided. How these objects are to be achieved, how these securities are to be secured, guarantees are to be secured, the manner of doing so. What is the manner? We will first secure the unity and the integrity of the nation, and while doing so, we will secure the dignity of the individual and also promote the fraternity among the individuals. So here the preamble itself prescribed the means. On one hand, there are the goals to be achieved. On other hand, there are guarantees given to the citizens, and on the third hand or third part, there are means to achieve. How these two set of goals are to be achieved? By maintaining unity and integrity of nation and promoting the fraternity among the individuals. In last para, in our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, so day of adoption of this Constitution is 26th November 1949, and it is celebrated in the country as Law Day, sometimes as Constitutional Day. Adopt, enact, and give to ourselves. Who started it? If we look at the first word of this preamble, we, the people of India. We, the people of India, expressed its wish and will through Constituent Assembly. So Constituent Assembly was working on behalf of the people of India. They derived the power to draft this constitution from the people of India. Whatever they did on behalf of the people of India and for the people of India. So after setting out these goals, they adopt. Adopt means स्वीकार करना, अंगीकृत करना, उसको ग्रहण करना. They adopt. They enact. Enactment, enact करना is the duty, or you can say is the work of the job of the legislature. Constituent Assembly was not the legislature, but since it was a constitution, it was in the name, it was in the shape of a document, it was in the shape of a legislation. a paramount legislation, they used the term enact. They drafted it, they adopted it, and also to fulfill the requirement of the legal framework, that who enacted. If the simple question is asked, who enacted the constitution, who framed this constitution, it was the Constituent Assembly. That's why they use the term deliberately, enact also. Adopt, enact, and to give ourselves this constitution. So you must be very much clear behind the concepts given in the preamble, and check karo. So as we have already gone through the concepts of this preamble, mentioned in the preamble, what is the utility of the preamble? As I told you that before drafting a comprehensive law on any subject, a draftsman needs to make a sketch what he want to do. So preamble is mere a set goal set out, and the objects to be achieved have been given place in the preamble. It is the deep deliberations, and it is an epitome of the broad features of the Constitution. It is to be treated as an epitome. A very interesting question in 1958 arose before Honorable Supreme Court in Berubari's case, whether the preamble is the part of the Constitution or not. The Honorable Supreme Court held that preamble is not the part of the Constitution, not source of any substantive power, and does not import any limitations. So, in nutshell, till 1960, the preamble was treated not to be the part of the Constitution. But in 1973, in Keshwanand Bharati's case, the Honorable Supreme Court again came across with the same question, and reviewing its judgment in Berubari's case, Honorable Supreme Court held that preamble is the part of the Constitution and is of extreme importance, and Constitution should be read and interpreted in the light of grand and noble vision expressed in the preamble. In fact, the preamble was relied on in imposing implied limitation on amendment under Article 368. In this case, it was also a crucial question whether the preamble can be amended. So, another question also arose, that whether it is a part of the Constitution. Since Honorable Supreme Court held it to be part of the Constitution, it was held to be the subject matter of the amendment by the Parliament by using its amending power under Article 368. So, the Parliament is competent enough to amend any part of this preamble by using its amending power under Article 368. But it is not so that it is an unfettered power. This power of Parliament is restricted with the same restrictions as applicable to the other parts. What are those other parts? You might have come across with the doctrine of basic structure theory. Which was that case? Keshwanand Bharati case, and then Minerva Mill case. In these two cases, Honorable Supreme Court held that Parliament has power to amend any part of the Constitution, including the preamble and including the 368 itself. But this amending power is not unfettered. It is restricted to the limitation of the basic structure theory. Means any amendment which shakes or destroys the basic structure of the Constitution would be ultra vires the Constitution and void. So Parliament's amending power is only to the extent of amending any part of the Constitution which does not changes the originality or the basic pillars of the Constitution. If any proposed amendment is going to destroy the basic pillars on which this Constitution of India stands, then such type of the amendment would be unconstitutional, being violative of the basic structure theory. So I think it's enough for you for regarding this preamble of the Constitution. Thank you.